All right. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Today's Daf Lamed Hey, Daf Lamed Vav. So we left off by the Mishnah. So it's a good, you start slow. A good way for me to wake up. I'm half asleep still. So we got to the Mishnah on Lamed Hey, Amud Aleph. So it says around 8 lines from the top or so. These are the things that the items, the ingredients that one can fulfill his obligation on Pesach, right? So one has an obligation to go ahead and eat matzah on the first night. So that is the obligation I'm referring to. So you should be having matzah made from these, from these grains. Bechitim, sa'arim, kusman, shifon, v'shivos. So basically, the 5 grains, as we know it, right? The chamisha minim of wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt, right? Those are the 5 grains. The one is we make mazonos on, and al michya. So to over here, so that is what one should have matzah made from. The yaitzin, now it goes halachically, what things also, the yaitzin, b'damai, v'maiser rishon, the Gemara will go through each one of these. One can fulfill his obligation with damai, right? Damai is grains that were purchased from an amaretz, so that is damai. So one can go ahead and we'll see, why one can fulfill his obligation with damai, even though one normally shouldn't eat damai. He should take trumas mais or tremaisos from there because one is the amaretz, a person who's not so meticulous in his mitzvah observation. So he at least takes truma, but he might not take meiser. So you have to go ahead and take that. Nevertheless, if you purchase from him, if you didn't take it from it, which is called demai, and you use that for matzah, also meiser rishon, when they took their truma. So if you have meiser rishon that was given to the Levi, and he basically removed the meiser rishon, right? He gets trumas meiser. So that is also, we'll explain why. Meiser sheni v'hektish sheniftu, and meiser sheni and hektish that were redeemed. You can go; they redeemed it upon money, and then you use that the grains that were redeemed. You use that for the grains for your matzah. You fulfill your obligation. V'kohanim and kohanim if there is bechala u'v'truma, or kohanim if they received the chala or truma from the Yisrael, and they use that for the mitzvah of motzi for matzah. Aval, but says the Mishnah, lo betevel velo b'maiser rishon. You can't go ahead and use tevel, right? Tevel is something that it's the final product of the field. It was the grains, and one is obligated now to go ahead and take trumas and meisers from there. If he doesn't take it before you take it, it's called tevel, right? This forbidden mixture with all the trumas and meisers still in there. Before you separate it, this is called tevel. If you go ahead and you take tevel and you take the grain straight from there and you make matzah, it's no good. That's the place. Tevel, it was right there. All right, but tevel, meiser rishon, or meiser rishon was given to a Levi and did not take the trumas meiser from there. Doesn't work. And not with meiser sheni or hektish that were not redeemed. You use the straight meiser sheni. We'll explain why. And the hektish they were not redeemed. And chalois says the last thing of the Mishnah, which the Gemara explained, but we don't get there today, is chalos hatoida v'rikiki nazir asan la'atzmai ein yaitzi behen. If one goes ahead and he makes he uses the matzah, part of the chalos that brought with the toda, you have 40 loaves, many of which are challah, and if he makes those or for a nazir, and he makes them for the purpose of the toda or the rikike nazir, ein yaitze behen, you can't use them, right? Those are made for another purpose. Those not made for matzah. You can't all of a sudden go ahead and switch them for matzah. However, asal limkor b'shuk, if he made them to go ahead and sell them the shuk, I'm going to sell to somebody who needs chalos for his toda or to a nazir who's bringing his karbanos, then he can go ahead and change his mind and use it for matzah. Fine. That was the Mishnah. I just got to grab a tissue. Hold on. Excuse me for 1 second. All right, sorry about that. My bad. All right. Zok the Gemara, the last skinny line on Lamed Hey on Aleph, beginning of the Gemara. Satana says Kusmin min chitin, shivolas shuar v'shipon min sairin. So, and now it basically sort of qualifies the different the different grain groups, and it says that spelt is really part of wheat, and the other two, oats and rye, are really part of barley. Okay, it says kulsmin gulba, right? So kulsmin is gulba, and shipon is dishra, right? And shibla shuar shivile tala. So I guess there are different notes as to exactly or what they are in terms of this gulba, right? Rashi over here describes. Here's Rashi. Right, a bunch of laws. He says the shiva tala, right? That is type of, I guess it looks like the like a targum shel shual, right? I guess it looks like the tail of a fox, right? And the shivali are the ears. So it's just, I guess, describing as the way the appearance look, but lamaisa. So it was two different grain groups, one of wheats and one of barleys. So the Gemara says hani in. So dafka these five and iris v'daychin lo, but not rice, right? These other things which you actually also do make. As long as you can't use rice matzah, v'daychin, or millet. So menani millet. So where do you know that from? So Amar Rabbi Shimon Lakish v'chein tana de Rabbi Yishmael v'chein tana de Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Lo'iseichel alav chametz shivas yamim teichel alav matzahs. Right, very important pasuk we're going to have for today. So it says over there, you shall not go ahead and eat chametz. 7 days eat matzah, right? Of lachamoni, we'll get there later in the pasuk. So it says, don't eat chametz, eat matzah. So now we're going to equate the two, all right? So dvarim haboy in the day chimetz, something that will come to become chametz. Then person can fulfill his obligation with matzah. Right? But something that use such as the orez and the deichen, that if you go ahead and you try to use the flour from rice and millet, then they don't actually go ahead and rise. Actually, they'll spoil. So since they'll spoil, they won't go ahead and hichmitz. Therefore, you cannot use it for matzah, right? So the two are intertwined. And Masnisin to like Rabbi Yechim Anuri, Damrab Oirez min Dogan, who holds that Oirez is a type of grain, and one is chayiv for a matzah or for bread, right? Karas. The Tanya we learn in Rabbi Yechim Anuri because it's close to hichmitz. So what does it mean? Shekar lehichmitz. Shekar lehichmitz the kadim umachmitz. Doesn't mean that it becomes, right? Shekarov means it quickly becomes chametz, it quickly leavens. Oh, Dilmar, perhaps karav lehichmitz havi chametz. Leavens, but not completely. So Toshma, come and listen. The title on Rabbi Sam Rabbi Yechim Nuri, Iris min Dogan who v'chaim lav chimutz kares v'adam yotzev deichvas of Pesach v'chein haya Rabbi Yechim Nuri Aimer. Karamis chayeves bechala, right? So he said over there beferish. He says this the iras rice is a grain, and you're chayiv kares for it. Obviously, if you're chayiv kares, that means it completely goes ahead and leavens. It must have been leavens quickly, right? And since you can become chametz, you also fulfill your obligation of matzah on Pesach, right? And he says also that karamis is chayiv v'chala. So my karamis, Amar Abaye, she tzanisa, makes sense. Okay, but my shenitza, Amar Papa, she tzina, the mishtacha b'nei klanisa, right? It's the shenitza that grows amongst, I guess, poppy seeds, some sort of poppy seeds. So that is a type of seed also that is also chayiv, I guess, a type of grain also, which one would be chayiv. Fine. So Omar Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rish Lakish Isa Shenilsha B'Yayin V'Shem Dvash. All right, new case. Ein Chayovin Al Chimutza Karis. One who goes ahead and needs, I guess, the dough, right, with wine or oil or devash, he's not chayiv for if it leavens, or when it leavens, he's not chayiv kares for it on Pesach. So Yasiv Rav Papa Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua Kamed Rav Idi Bar Avin v'Yasiv Rav Idi Bar Avin v'Kamen Anim. So Rav Papa was sitting there, and Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua was sitting there in front of Rav Idi, and Rav Idi was like falling asleep. So Amar Lei Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua Rav Papa. So he says, Rav Huna turns to Rav Yeshua and he says, "My time of the Reish Lakish. What's the reason, according to Reish Lakish, who we just quoted, to say that any dough that needed with wine, oil, or honey is not chayiv kares?" So it says, the pasuk says, "Lo yisrael alav chametz." It connects the two between chametz and matzah. And matzah chayiv nachimutza kares. Only something you're chayiv that you can use for matzah is what you're chayiv kares for. But these things using wine, oil, or honey, right? Those things you cannot use for matzah, right? Because those are called matzah ashira, right? Those are called matzah ashira, right? Ashira from the usher being rich matzah. They're made with rich liquids. And ein chayavin al chimutza kares. So since you can't go ahead and use them for the mitzvah matzah, because we will soon see it's called lechem oni, poor man's bread. And this is going to be rich bread because it's made from honey, oil, or wine, right? So therefore, since it's rich bread, it's rich bread, you can't use it for the chiyuv of matzah. And since you can't use it for chiyuv of matzah, therefore it does not carry a kares on Pesach. All right, so that was what was said. So Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua Rav Papa side Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua Rav Papa. So he said himchua ugmo, right? So he said over here, let's say he went ahead and he melted it, he dissolved it, right? And then he swallowed it, right? So im chametzu onish kares. If it's something that he went ahead and dissolved, right? And if it was chametz, then he's chayiv kares. V'imatzahu. And if it was matzah, ein adam yaitze b'nidei chavas Pesach. The person does not fulfill his obligation of Pesach because he basically drank it, he didn't eat it. The ein adam yaitze b'nidei chavas b'matzah. Okay, so how could you say that this thing that he just drank, right, that he would be chayiv for kares if he can't fulfill the mitzvah of matzah? So he said, Rav Idi Bar Avin. So as I mentioned before, Rav Idi Bar Avin was sitting in front of them, and he was the one falling asleep. And all of a sudden, he sort of heard this, right, in his dreams. Then all of a sudden, he realized it was his dreams. He said they were talking. So he woke up and he said, "Amar Lahu, Dardiki, right, children, Hainu Tam Dereish Lakish, Mishum Dahavi Lu Me Peros, right, because over here, right, these are called Me Peros, right. These are called. They are made from fruit juices, right, and something that is made from a fruit juice, right, i.e. the yain, the shem, and dvash, right? Those things are basically considered to be mei peros, and therefore mei peros, and turn the page, mei peros ein machmitzin, and therefore mei peros does not leaven, right? So therefore, since they don't go ahead and leaven, so therefore he really should be putter from kares. So therefore he argued in this case that it would be putter in this case because these are meperos, and therefore it's not a kasha, what we said earlier. So really, according to what we said.
So is it a chata? What do you get? What's the punishment for eating those on Pesach?
So we do find that there's other cases where it is usser, right? But does not carry the what's called the penalty of kares, right? So in this case, I guess as we'll see later on by chametz nuksha, we get into later on with hardened chametz and stuff that's not gamur, right? So that stuff does carry other isurim, but it does not carry the isur of kares. Right, so Shaila also whether chametz nuksha is actually the rabbanon d'oraisa. So yeah, fine. 2 dots. Now, so that was what we discussed in terms of the ingredients. So we said the 5. It's the 5 ingredients. Those are the ones you're chayiv for, made from those grains, right? Made from those grains, and because those grains one could be chayiv kares for, therefore those are the grains that you use for matzah. those five and no others. And also, we touched a little upon, we're going to get back to it also in terms of using liquids to go ahead and eat it. Remember, the wine, oil, and honey was not used actually as the grains, right? That was the grains itself. That was used sort of in lieu of the water. And then we're going to get back to this matzah, shira, and all that. Fine. So let's see the Gemara. Top line, lamed hey, amud beis. So so one can go ahead and fulfill his obligation of matzah, partaking from demai, which we said demai is something that he purchased from an amaretz, and really, if you purchase it from an amaretz, normally the seller should take the trumas ma'aser for it. But somebody who's not so meticulous in his mitzvah, his mitzvah observance, so therefore, such a person he probably didn't go ahead and take ma'aser. Therefore, demai means you should go ahead and take ma'aser. So it says demai. Why is it mutter? I can go ahead and have demai. So kevan the boy mafker l'nenichse haviani. The eichel demai. So since if a person wanted, he can go ahead and make all his possessions hefker, and therefore, if he makes it hefker, he become a poor person. And a poor person is allowed to go ahead and ani. Certain people are allowed to eat demai, one of which is an ani, and a poor person. And hashinami chazile, and so too now it's fed. Tonight we learn in the Mishnah, machlina sa'anim demai v'sachsani demai. You're allowed to go ahead and feed anim, poor people demai, and also achsania was the visiting Jewish soldiers that they were traveling, they were fighting, and during times they were staying in the neighborhood, so they didn't have more with them. So therefore, you're allowed to go ahead and feed them demai. So Beis Shammai says you can't. Beis Hillel said you can't go ahead and feed poor people and the visiting soldiers. And since over here you can make yourself a poor person, therefore no reason why you can't go ahead and use it for the mitzvah of matzah. Now, next case in the Mishnah, it says to that says the Ma'aser Rishon Shnat Shumasa v'Chulei. So Ma'aser Rishon, basically, it was given the Ma'aser Rishon, the 10th was given to the Levi, and then he went ahead and gave Shumas Ma'aser. He gave 1/10 of his 10th, right, that he received, and he gives that to the Kohen. That's called Shumas Ma'aser. So the Gemara says, Pshita, it's obvious. If he took Shumas Ma'aser, obviously it's full-fledged good to go. So Kevan Shenat Shumaso Chulin Havi. So he says, "Look." So we're talking about so since over here, right, that he took it, his truma, it's considered to be chulin. So what's the big chiddush here, right? So he says, "Lo tzricha shekdima b'shivalim v'nat lahimenet shumas ma'aser." He went ahead and he jumped the gun while the grain was still in its ears. He took from it the trumas ma'aser, v'loinat lahimena truma gedola. Right? He went ahead and he gave ma'aser to the Levi. Right before it was made in piles, the guy jumped the gun, gave Meiser before Truma. So he gave Meiser to Levi, and on that, the Levi gave the Trumas Meiser, and from that pile, from that Trumas Meiser, we said it's good to go, right? So and therefore the Truma Gedola was never taken, right? Now the Truma Gedola, really what happened, let's say we're talking about the product is 100, okay? So now if the product is 100, you take Truma Gedola, which is 2%. Okay, so now there's 98. Then you take 1/10 of that, which is 9.8, right? And then so the Levi gets 9.8, and then he takes 1/10 of his, which is 0.98, right? That goes there. But now if you went ahead early and he gave the Truma Gedola first, you took 10, right, from there. And therefore, when you have 90 left and you give 2%, the Truma Gedola is actually less, right? Because the Truma Gedola is only on the 90. Right? It's not on the 100. So therefore, maybe it's a problem. So we say, no, even in this case, and then he gives it, it's okay. He doesn't have to go ahead and give extra, right? So he said, Ma'aser Rishon, that they jumped the gun, they went ahead and they took it while it's still in its ears. Pater mitruma gedola. Over there, it's pater from truma gedola. She'amar. Is the pasuk over there? It says, because you don't have to give the extra truma gedola, you just give the trumas ma'aser. Shnamar v'rimosavimenu trumas Hashem ma'aser mina ma'aser. So it says ma'aser mina ma'aser lecha v'loy truma gedola v'trumas ma'aser mina ma'aser. It says when over there the lady gives ma'aser mina ma'aser, it means he gives 1/10 of his ma'aser, i.e. the trumas ma'aser, but he doesn't give Truma Gedola and Trumas Meiser from his Meiser. So therefore, the pasuk only tells you give one, not two. Therefore, if they jumped the gun and gave the Levi first. Therefore, you only give. Therefore, you jump the gun. The Levi only gives the Trumas Meiser. He doesn't have to give a Truma Gedola.
So she's not chayavet to give Maser Gadol from her 1.8, correct? She can use it to do matzah. Has no chiyuv to give Maser Gadol from the 1.8% that we said.
No. 1 second. Which 1 second?
No, I'm saying which one we can do. We can do the matzah without worry about matzah.
After the Levi receives his Meiser from the
Right.
Okay?
The one,
Right.
Yes.
And then, so you give me, right? You're a Yisrael. You give me. I'm a Levi, right? So you give me. Jump the gun, right? You gave me while it's still in its ears. You gave me 10% of your produce. I took only.
I'm sorry. I meant the Levi. The Levi doesn't have to give. He can do the matzah, then give his matzah, right? Matzah of the matzah. That's
no. He has to give it first because then it's like tevel, right? Because if I'm giving the meiser,
right. But who is patur in this case? Who is patur? That's what I try to figure out. Who is patur and can do the matzah? The Levi or the Maser Gadol?
Which lady here?
The one that received.
Right. So the Levi, right? He wants to go ahead. He wants to eat. Right. We're talking about the Levi himself. He wants to go ahead and use his food for meiser. So as long as he gives, or he loses his food for matzah, as long as he gives trumas meiser, I go ahead and I give, because he's my Kohen, right? I give him my trumas meiser at 10.
Right. So you have to inform. Right. Got it. So really, he cannot do his matzah unless he gives first the matzah that you didn't give. Right.
The trumas meiser. But the truma gedola was never given because we took the trumas meiser before the truma gedola was ever taken. That's the issue. So the Gemara wants to know, so why do we make such a situation where he jumped the gun like that? The Gemara says like this. Because if you jump the gun, right, if you gave me your meiser before you took the truma gedola, right?
Right. They
say it's according to Rabbi, I think it was Rabbi Avo, right? According to Rabbi Avo, it was okay. So Amar later Rav Papa. I understand. So why are you making it a situation where Yigal jumped the gun and he gave me while the crop was still in its ears? Why aren't we talking about a case where Yigal made a regular harvest, he put it in a pile, and then usually what you're supposed to do is give your Truma Gedola first. You call Rabbi Reese and you say, hey, I have your Truma Gedola. Instead, you call your Levi and you give it to your Levi. And therefore, when you end up giving the Truma Gedola, you don't give it on 100 bushels, you're only giving it on 90 bushels. Nevertheless, we say that's not a problem. So why do we why do we do that situation when it's still in the pile? So on that, the pasuk says, Mikol masnasechem tarimo as kol trumas Hashem. So it says over there, right, for everything. Now, in that case, I would have to go ahead and give meiser, right? It says from all the gifts, right? You have to go ahead from all the matanos. You have to give trumas Hashem. So if it was in that case, if it was done normally, then in addition for me giving trumas meiser, I also have to give truma gedola. So the Gemara says, my rice. Didn't we just say earlier that the Levi is only responsible to give trumas meiser and not truma gedola? So since the one, which one we're going to say the one that he has to give all the matanos from, that's the one that was already considered to be a pile of grain versus the one taken from the ears. Therefore, that one you're not doing while it's a pile of grain. So in this case, we met the case in the Mishnah that says we're only talking about a case of where dafka it was taken early while it was still growing, while it was still in its ears before it was made into a pile. But if it was made into a pile, and then you gave the Levi first, and the Levi gave his trumas meiser. If he didn't take truma gedola, he can't use the remaining part of his pile for the mitzvah of matzah. Fine.
That's it. That's understood. Okay.
Two dots. So Ma'aser Sheni v'Hekdesh Sheniftu, we're talking about Ma'aser Sheni v'Hekdesh, they were redeemed. So the Gemara says, Pshita, if they were redeemed, it's full years. Why wouldn't you be able to use it for matzah? So our answer is no. So normally when one goes ahead and he redeems his own stuff, he redeems his own Hekdesh or he redeems his own Ma'aser Sheni, he has to add on a fifth. But over here, he didn't go ahead and add on a fifth. He just redeemed it for its value. We see over here that if he didn't tag on the fifth, it's not a ma'akev. It doesn't prevent the redeeming from occurring. It still is chal. And Kohanim, they can also go ahead and use the b'chal of a truma. They can use it for the chal and truma. So once again, pshita, it's obvious it's given to them. So Moses said some matzah shava l'chol adam, but maybe matzah should come from something which everybody can go ahead and partake of, and therefore, since everybody can't have challah because everyone's not a kohen, maybe you can't use it. So kamashlan matzahs. There says matzahs. It says in the plural matzahs riba. So it includes even matzah that's only fit for some, i.e., challah only fit for kohanim, so they can use it for their matzah. Avalo, but tevel. But then the Mishnah turns to the stuff that they can't do. The first of which is you can't have tevel. Remember, tevel is something that is a bile, which is you're supposed to take chumas meiser for, and then if you don't go ahead and take it, that pile is called tevel. So there's pshita. So it says no, lo tzricha b'tevel midrabanan. Maybe we're talking about not maybe we're talking about even something which is tevel derabanan, right? Only something which is the rabbanan say really midiraisa you don't have to take chumas meiser for, but the rabbanan say you're chayav to do it. If you didn't do it, then you can't go ahead and do it. And shazara ba'atzis shein anako. Maybe so let's say a case of a plant growing in a pot without a hole in the bottom. So the rabbanan are mechayiv you to take chumas meiser for, and the guy didn't take chumas meiser for. Then he has grains and he wants to go ahead and use that grain for matzah. You cannot because midrabanan, you're chayav to go ahead and take chumas meiser for, and therefore it's tevel midrabanan. And below meiser rishon shalonata chumaso, also meiser rishon they did not take the chumaso. So it says pshita. If I didn't take chumas the chumas meiser, it's obvious. The Gemara says no pshita lo tzricha shehikdimu bekri. Exact case that we discussed earlier, right? The case of when Yigal went ahead, but instead of doing it, he made it into a pile first. And he made it into a pile first, and he says, "Here, Yoel, I see you first. I didn't see the Kohen. Go ahead." Your Meiser Rishon, Samalte Moses, I could later Papa Abaye. Maybe it's later Papa Abaye that since over there, maybe since I already have you gave me the Meiser, and maybe the halach is you only take Trumas Meiser from the Meiser, and not Trumas Meiser and Truma Gedola from the Meiser.
Really, the chiyuv is when I give Levi his portion, I have to inform him that I didn't take Truma Gedola. That is his responsibility to spread it. Really, that's the right way of doing it.
The right way of doing it is for the truma to be taken first.
Right. But if he didn't take it because he saw you first, he said, listen, I didn't give to Magdola, make sure you give to Magdola. But then you are totally covered.
If one went further, they would have to let the Levi know, because if Levi doesn't go ahead and take the Truma Smeiser and the Truma, then it's a problem.
Right.
Yeah. Fine. So Veloy b'Meiser Sheni v'Hekdesh Shalenifdu, and also Meiser Sheni and Hekdesh are not redeemed. So the rest of Pshita, if it wasn't redeemed, right? Of course you can't use it for matzah. So the rest says Pshita. So Lielim Denifdu, it really was redeemed. It wasn't it wasn't redeemed properly. How so? So Meiser Sheni Shepadu Agavasima, right? Meiser Sheni was redeemed, but on a coin that didn't mint. The Rachman Amar v'Tzarasa Kesef. The pasuk says v'Tzarasa Kesef. Use the lashon Tzarasa. You give, if the Meiser Sheni is too much to take Yerushalayim, you go ahead and put in money and take the money to Yerushalayim. So Tzarasa Kesef. So Davar Sheish Tzura. Something that has a tzura, something that has an image on it, right? There's a minted on it. That's a type of coin, but you can't use a coin without a mint. The hekdesh, and also hekdesh shechilu al gabi karka. The hekdesh was redeemed with land. The Rachman Amar v'nasan hakesef. When you redeem something which is hekdesh, it says you give the kesef the kamlo, and he goes ahead and takes it. And therefore, only dafka something that has movable, but not karka. So karka doesn't really redeem it. So therefore, if it's redeemed with karka, that doesn't work. Or if it's redeemed by Sasheni with kesef, with money that did not have a mint, that also does not work. But excuse me, Tanur Rabbanan. So Yachol Yaitse Adam Yidei Chavasa B'Tevel Shalanitzka. So you might think a person can go ahead and fulfill his obligation, right? Without that, that doesn't have that wasn't. Nothing was taken from. It's still tevel. So Gemara says called tevel. Nami hailo niska. What do you mean? It says right. First of all, tevel. All tevel is something that hasn't been taken from. So what are you talking about here? So ela betevel shaloniska and called tzarko. Right. Rather, it was tevel that they didn't take all the chumas and meisers properly. How so? Shanit let me manage chuma gedaylav lo need to manage chumas meiser. That they took from it. Let's say the chuma gedayla, right? The 2%, right? That from the beginning, right? The 1/50th, but they did not go ahead and take chumas meiser. Or, excuse me, or Meiser Rishon. Hello, Meiser Sheni. They took the Meiser Rishon, but or V'afilu Meiser Ani. They didn't take the Meiser Rishon in the Meiser Sheni in years 1, 2, 4, and 5, or Meiser Ani in years 3 and 6. And they only took partially. So now we says you might. So let's go back to the statement because this is gonna be a long brisa. So you might, because we just got distracted. So you might think that a person can fulfill his obligation with tevel that they didn't take all the way, so menayin. So how do we know that you can't use it at all? So tamaloymer lo yisaychel alav chametz. Only something that has an isser of you can't eat this because of chametz. We'll exclude this because the issue of eating this tevel is not just because it would be chametz, but because it's tevel. So something that has a separate isser, such as tevel, right? You can't use that for your matzah. So therefore, something which you can't eat only because of chametz, that you can use for the matzah because the two are intertwined, as you pointed out earlier in the same pasuk. But something that you're chai for in addition to chametz, such as if it was also partially tevel, then that is not something you can fulfill your obligation for matzah. So I visur the chametz lehechanaza. So if you're not chai for chametz, where to go? So Rav Sheshes says no. First, so his first suggestion is. Some Rav Sheshes, how many Rabbi Shimon? He does opinion. Rabbi Shimon the Amar ein iser chal iser. Then he holds you can't have ein iser chal iser. That if you already have existing iser, you can't have an additional iser chal an iser. Only one iser at a time. All right. The Tanya we learn in Brayso. Rabbi Shimon Aimer. Turn the page. Ha oichel nevela b'yom kippurim pater. One who goes ahead and eats nevela in Yom Kippur is pater from pater michatas of Yom Kippur if he did a b'shogeg, right? Because ein iser chalal iser, right? So he's already chai for nevela, right? It was usher as a nevela first before the clock or the sun went down on the 10th of Tishrei. So therefore, since there already was an existing iser, you can't be chai for an additional chatas on Yom Kippurim. Not talking about a case of mazid, but we're talking about a case of shogeg over there. And so that was one teretz. And Ravino Amar afilu tema derabbanan. Even if you say this is derabbanan, right? Even if you say it's a shita of the Rabbanan who says Isser can be Chal Isser, not like a Shimon. So Mishi Sur Mishum Bal Teichel Chametz Bilvat, right? Now, is that what we say that you can use it for the mitzvah of matzah is not something that doesn't have, no, it's not that you're not chai for the Isser of Chametz. You are chai for the Isser of Chametz, but it means something that you would have been only chayiv for chametz. Bilvat. Only that. Yatzazeh, that would exclude tevel. Shein isur mishum bal teichel chametz bilvat. That's its only isur is not just chametz. Ela af mishum bal teichel tevel. But rather, there's two isurim on it. And since it's two isurim, that's not something you can use for matzah. Only something that if you would eat it, right, as chametz, it would only have one isur. That you can go ahead and use it for your mitzvah matzah. So the word says, however, immediate bilvat. See, doesn't say bilvat. It doesn't say bilvat, right? It just says. Just the answer. So Ella mechavorta could the Rav Sheshes. Rather, it must be like Sheshes, like the opinion of Rav Shimon. Fine. No,
so that means that if you eat chametz that was not truma was not taken, then that it's not really chametz, and you're not going to be chayiv kares on that. You might be chayiv whatever it would be for not taking truma.
It just means that type of grain. Since that grain, I could potentially be chayiv kares for chametz, therefore I can go ahead and use it for my matzah. But something that there is an additional isser besides chametz, such as tevel or some other thing, right? Then I wouldn't be able to use that for my matzah, right? So not all right. So only something that is your chayiv for that, and not anything else.
Okay.
All right. Now, Tan Rabban. You might think that a person go ahead and fulfill his obligation of matzah using Ma'aser Sheni Yerushalayim. All right, now Ma'aser Sheni, remember, is during years 1, 2. During years, during 1, 2, 4, and 5, right? I was thinking about something else, right? So during years 1, 2, 4, and 5, you Ma'aser Sheni. First, you give Ma'aser to the Kohen, and then Ma'aser Sheni you actually keep, sort of, and you can go ahead and bring all your food to Yerushalayim, eat it there, or if it's too much, go ahead, exchange it into money, and then bring that money to Yerushalayim and spend it in the markets there now and eat there. So you can maybe go ahead and use your Ma'aser Sheni for your the mitzvah of matzah. Therefore, it says lechem oni. So it says lechem oni. All right, lechem oni. Ma shenechel ba'aninus. Right, something that is written with in aninus, right? With an aleph. Okay, aleph is einain, like an einain, like a person who lost, right, before the shiva. Person is an einain, right? So basically, mashinechal ba'aninus. So lechem oni means something that somebody who was an einain, right? Somebody who was, this mourner would eat. So yatzazeh shein nechal ba'aninus el b'simcha. That would exclude meiser sheni, which is eaten with happiness, and therefore you can't go ahead and use meiser sheni for matzah. All right, so matzah has to be something which is fit for an onain. That's the opinion of Rabbi Glili, and that excludes meiser sheni. All right, we're going to see a couple of opinions here. That was now Rabbi Kiva Amir. Matzahs riba. He argues. He says matzah, since it says matzahs with plural, right? It says matzahs twice, right? So therefore, it's a riba. It includes even meiser sheni. So he argues. He says no. Ma'aser sheni you can use for matzah. Yosef Glili at this point in time says you cannot use ma'aser rishon for matzah. If that's the case, why say lechamoni? So probably isa shenil shabayayin v'shem dvash. No, because I learned like oni as poor, and therefore something which is not a rich bread, and therefore that it would exclude something that not necessarily eating with happiness, right? But rather to exclude something that was done with richness, right? Something done with richness, and they'll make a person not poor, and therefore such as using wine, oils, and honey. So my time with Rabbi Kiva, what's the reason according to Rabbi Kiva? So miksiv lechem oni. Does it say lechem oni with a vav? Ani ksiv, it says ani, so therefore the main part is poor, and therefore going on, don't make it rich bread, right? Ani ksiv without the vav. If Rabbi Yosef Glili says mi karina ani, does it say? Do we pronounce it ani? No, oni karina. We read it oni, which was referring to eating, a person in the morning, as opposed to eating besimcha. I Rabbi Kiva hi the karina be oni, and the reason why we pronounce it oni is kedeshmuel. Damar Shmuel, lechem oni, lechem she'einin alav dvarim harbe, right? There's a third meaning, oni, right? Like oni, like answering, right? In other words, this is something that is said, it is bread that we answer many things upon, right? We say the Haggadah upon it, so therefore we answer many things on it. That's what it means. It's nothing to do, therefore that's the reason why we pronounce it oni, right? As opposed to ani, is to teach you that they're onin dvarim harbe upon it. Fine. Now, Rabbi Kiva Isa Shenil Shabiyayim V'Shem and Vashlo, and you're telling me Rabbi Kiva holds, right? As I just said earlier, that you can't go ahead and use matzah that was kneaded, right? That was made with wine, oil, and honey. Votanya, we're learning a brisa. We're going to bring a brisa now. And remember, that was the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Let's wait for Rabbi Kiva in the brisa. So it says, Ein Lashon Isa Pesach B'Yayim V'Shem and Vash. One should not go ahead and use knead with dough, such for Pesach yain, shem and dvash. You can use any of these things: wine, oil, and honey. And if he does it, then it's a machlekes. Rabbi Gamliel, Omer tisarach miyad, burn it right away. Chametz, toss it, burn it right away. He can go ahead and eat it. So two opinions. We didn't bring in Rabbi Kiva yet. So one should not do it according to the Tanna Kama, right? That was brought in. And if one does go ahead and knead it with wine, oil, honey, right? Then machlokes. Rabbi Gamliel says destroy right away. It's chametz, and chametz say it's not chametz. You can go ahead and eat it. V'omar Rabbi Kiva now it jumps in Rabbi Kiva. So Shabbos, it's Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua one time on Shabbos. I used to go ahead and stay by Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. I went for them, and in Pesach, I went ahead and I put in some either wine, oil, or honey. V'lo amrli davar. He didn't say anything to me, right? So it sounds like, right, he did it lechatchila. He used it, right? So he used it lechatchila. V'yafi shein loshin mekatzibo, right? And even though, says the Brisa, nothing to do with what we just said, and then right now we'll get back to it. By the way, even though you can't go ahead and knead it with it, basically you can go ahead and cover it and put it like a cover texture on the outside, right? So, and that part, us on the Tanna Kama, that even goes according to the Tanna Kama, who says you can't go ahead and do lisha with it, you can't knead it into it, but however, you can go ahead and smear it on top, like a glaze or something on top of it. Es shalashin bo mekatibo. Es shein lashin bo and mekatibo. No, that which you can go ahead and you're allowed to knead it. You can go ahead and smear it on top and glaze it with it. But if you can't knead with it, then you can't glaze it, and therefore you would not be able to go ahead and glaze with the honey, wine, or oil. The shavin, however, they all agree, shein lashin esa isa be paishin. They all agree that you can't go ahead and, I guess, knead it in paishin, in water that's sort of sitting out there, room temperature water, because that sort of speeds up the hichmitz process, and not just 18 minutes or whatever it is, but even much faster than that. So going back to what we said, it's a kasha. Rabbi Akiva earlier said you can't use honey, wine, or oil. And over here, he said he used to go ahead and do it on Shabbos when he used to say Shabbos, and over Pesach, he used to do it for Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. So like kasha, ha b'yom tov rishon, ha b'yom tov shein. When it comes to the mitzvah of matzah on the first night, which has to be a requirement of lechamoni, that he said you can't do it. However, that which he needed for them during Pesach was when it was the other days, right? It was b'yom tov sheni. It was the other days of Pesach, and therefore there is no chiyuv of lechem oni. So therefore, you can have rich bread, right? You just can't use it for your mitzvah of matzah, but you can have the rich bread later in Pesach. Keda Amar lehu Rabbi Shula b'nei. Like Yeshua told his sons, right? On the first day, don't go ahead and make and knead it with milk, right? Because that's matzah shira, that's rich matzah. However, during the other days, you can go ahead and there's a Pesach, go ahead and eat for me challah. So the Gemara says, 1 second, challah, right? This reminds me of something we just said earlier. Tanya, and Lashon is b'challah. The chalov, one cannot go ahead and knead the dough, right, using milk, right, because it makes it milk. Like lush, kol pasa surah, because then you might go ahead and hergo aveira. You might have a hamburger using these milchik buns, right? I think someone told me it was a problem in Wrigley Field when they had the hot dogs there. They had the milchik buns. There was a problem with basar v'chalov, right? To sell the hot dogs is even worse than just to sell treif, right? Because the basar v'cholov, one can't get a hana, so it was a problem of selling the hot dogs because milchik buns, right, with the fleishik, with the Hebrew National, whatever they used, best kosher, right, or whatever. I forgot exactly, but it was basically not kosher with the milchik buns. But anyways, so over here, the milchik buns, right, the milchik bread, so you can't do it. So how did he tell his kids, right, to go ahead and make matzah with cholov? Right. On the first day, he says, don't go ahead and use honey, because then honey makes a matzah shira. Matzah shira, I can't go ahead and use it for Seder nights. However, after that, you can go ahead and knead it with honey. Or viboy sema. Or I give you another there's liela b'chalva. Really, it wasn't honey. It was Torah on milk, right? And but he said, Kadamar Ravina, right? Ka'ayin Torah shari, right? He told him to make it like very small, like that, the eye of a Torah of a shore. That's mutter and hakanami b'ayin Torah. So over here was the case of it was small, like the size of an eye of a shore of a bull, and therefore that would be mutter. So since over there they ruled that something which is basically small they eat right away, therefore that's not a problem of making it nochas. Fine. Now to that. So back to what we said in the brisa: the shavin shein lashin esa isa v'paishin. Right, you can't go ahead and knead it in paishin, in water that's sitting out, in the water that's is sitting there at room temperature. So ma'ishnam menachos. Why is this different than menachos? Right, menachos are flour offerings that we offer in the temple. The Tanan over there, kol hamenachos niloishet paishin. All the menachos, you go ahead and you need them. When you need them, you can use paishin. You can use in the water that's sitting out there. However, just make sure you guard it that it doesn't become chametz. So why over there do we allow you to go ahead and knead it in paishin? But in our case, by matzah, we don't allow you to. So when I answer, no, that over there was said in the Beis Hamikdash to the Kohanim, right, who doing the avoda. So there's very few people who are doing the avoda, so they're going to be careful. There's zaris, the Kohanim is reason. But over here, we're talking about all the people, in the world, all the Jewish people. So therefore, we're not going to allow you to do it. So if that's the case, there's nami lasis, right? If that's the case, we should say that if, right, we allow, right? That we trust the Kohanim. Let the Kohanim go ahead and soak the kernels, right? Before they're basically, pounded out, right? So why do we say over there, right? Alama Rabbi Zera Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah Amar Shmuel Chitin Shel Menachos Ein L'Tusina So right? So why do we say over there that you can't go ahead and pound it out there, right? Why is that? If we trust the Kohanim that it won't become chametz, let them go ahead and soak it first, right? So Lisha Bezrizin Isa, the Sisa Lesa Bezrizin. No, when the kneading is done in the Mikdash by the Kohanim. So therefore, since it's done in the Mikdash by the Kohanim, therefore we trust it. But to soak the kernels before, that could be done, right, outside by anybody. So therefore, since it's done by anybody, therefore it's not done by the Zrizim, not done by the Kohanim, and therefore we don't trust that process, and therefore that process might become hichmitz, and therefore we don't allow the soaking of the kernels before. I have Elisha Misa Bezrizim. And his kneading done, it has to be done by Zrizim. Vaksiv, the pasuk says over there, V'yatzak aleh Hashem v'chulei, right? V'yivu el bnei Aaron haKohanim v'komatz. It says over there, you go ahead, you knead it, you put oil on it, and then you bring it to the Kohanim, and then they do kamitza, right? So it sounds like kamitza ve'elach mitzvah kahuna. When do the Kohanim come into play? They bring it to the Kohen, and then there's kamitza. It sounds like from the kamitza and on is when the Kohanim take over, and Elisha is done before then, right? So li made al yitzuka v'lila shekshera b'chol adam. So we see over there that the pouring and the mixing and the kneading and all that was done b'chol adam. So how could you say the Elisha was done by Zrizim, by Kohanim? We see over here the Kohanim only did the kamitza and on. Everything was done before then. So Gemara says no. Elisha, you're right when it comes to Elisha. Nihi, but there's reason lessa. You're right. It wasn't done dafko by Kohanim. However, b'makom Zrizim isa, but it was done in the Mikdash. It was done in the makom Zrizim. So since it's done in the makom Mikdash, therefore it's different. Therefore, we'll trust the process. Blila ksheira bezar chutz lechaymas azara psua. The blila, to go ahead and the mixing, right? The oil and the flour and all that, it was ksheira with a non-kohen. However, outside of the azara, it's puzzle. To exclude the sisa, as opposed to the sisa, right? If you're going to go ahead and soak the kernels, then those were done by non-kohanim and not in the mikdash. Why by the mincha oimer? The tiny you're going over there. Minchas oimer lusisin oisa v'tzayvin oisa. Those can be done, right? Those are soaked. So I thought we don't soak. Why are those soaked, right? So Gemara says, no, tzibur shani. Since it's done by the tzibur, on behalf of the tzibur, whoever's doing it on behalf of the tzibur will be careful if it does not become chametz. And therefore, dafkin that one mincha, right? The mincha of the oimer, which is brought once a year. Therefore, that was in that case we say that you can go ahead and soak it. Fine. Tana Rabbanan. Yachol yaitze adam yidei chavasa bebikurim. So we touched a little bit about before about Meister Sheni. Now bikurim is also similar in terms of that place is in Yerushalayim, right? To be eaten by, and the bikurim are the shiva minim, the first fruits are basically of the seven shiva minim that grow in Eretz Yisrael are given to the Kohan and taken to Yerushalayim. So Tamalaymar, so it says Yachol Yitzedam bikurim Tamalaymar. Therefore it says Bechol Moshe Seichem Teichlu Matzos. It says there by matzah and all of your dwellings Bechol Moshe Seichem. So matzah nechad Bechol Moshe Seichem. So only what can be used for matzah? Something that can be eaten everywhere, right? So Bechol Moshe Seichem Yaseh Bikurim Sheina Nechlan Bechol Moshe Seichem Ela B'Yushalayim. Divrei Rabbi Yosei Glili. But however, it says Rabbi Yosei Glili, since bikurim can only be eaten in Yerushalayim and not Bechol Moshe Seichem and not in all your dwelling places, it can't be eaten out in Renana, right? So therefore, bikurim cannot be used for your matzah. Rabbi Kiva Omer, he says, no, I have a different source. Matzah umaror, it says over there matzah umaror, right? So ma maror she'ena bikurim, just like maror is not from an ingredient in bikurim, it's only the shivas minim, but maror is not listed in there, right? So ma maror she'ena bikurim, af matzah she'ena bikurim. So too, matzah cannot be used from, be taken from bikurim. So the Gemara says, well, that doesn't make sense. What do you mean by maror? Right? You can't. There is no species of maror, right? There is no, whatever you're going to use for maror, right? The bitter herb, right? That's not the shiva minim. So af matzah shem b'mina b'bikurim, right? Well, matzah, wheat, right? Wheat is not one of them. Wheat and barley, aren't those two of the shiva minim, right? So that doesn't qualify. So maybe because of that has part of bikurim, maybe bikurim should be used, right? So turn the page. So wheat and barley, right? So wheat and barley can't use. Of course you can use it. So maybe you say wheat and barley, bikurim you could be able to use. So therefore it says, so you might think that you can't use it. So therefore it says, Talmud Leimar, therefore it says, matzos riba. It says the word matzah twice, right? That in order to go ahead and teach you that even in matzah, one can go ahead and use matzah for bikur. See, matzah. Therefore, it includes it to say that that you can go ahead and use matzah, right, or make matzah from chito sara, even though it's not. It's one of the shiva minim. So the Gemara says, "I matzahs riba." If you learn it from matzah riba, I feel bikurim nami. So then bikurim, right, should be good. In other words, if your whole source is because the pasuk says matzah maror, but only things that are subject, right, to bikurim can use, and then you said your whole reason was no, you could even use a wheat and barley for matzah, right? Because the pasuk of matzahs. So why don't you use the pasuk of matzahs to not only to include also bikurim? Right? Not just to include to say, hey, you can make matzah out of wheat and barley, even though they're from the shiva minim, right? But say you can use bikurim as your matzah, right? So the Gemara says that. So he says, Rabbi Akiva was chayzer. He was chayzer not in his opinion that bikurim, he still agrees that bikurim is no good. Rather, he's chayzer from his opinion of learning it from matzahs riba. Rather, he uses the same proof as Rabbi Yosef Glili. Rabbi Yosef Glili's proof was what? His proof was b'chol moshoseichem. It has to be something which is eaten, right? Can be eaten all over Eretz Yisrael, right? But or all over the world, right? But and therefore that will exclude bikurim that cannot. And where do we see that Rabbi Kiva was chayzer? The Tanya, we're learning in the Bryce. Yachol yatsa adam yichavas bikurim. You might think a person fulfills obligation of bikurim. Therefore it says b'chol moshoseichem techlu matzos. In all of your dwellings, right? You should go ahead and eat your matzos. So matzah nechaz b'chol moshavos. So any matzah is eaten in any place that you can go ahead and use as your matzah. So yatsa bikurim sheinam nechalim b'chol moshavos el b'Yerushalayim. That would exclude bikurim because only be eaten in Yerushalayim. So yachol shani might see af ma'aser sheni. What a ma'aser sheni? Right? We mentioned earlier, ma'aser sheni can only be eaten in Yerushalayim. So maybe that should be the same thing. B'chol moshavosechem should exclude bikurim and ma'aser sheni. So therefore he says Talmud Leibar. Matzahs riba. It says matzahs twice. So therefore, to include even matzah made from ma'aser sheni can be used as your matzahs. The Gemara says, hold on. Why does matzahs, right? If you're going to include one that can be eaten only in Yerushalayim, why are you including ma'aser sheni and excluding bikurim? Say the other way around. Say bikurim matzah can be good and ma'aser sheni cannot be good. So the Gemara answers, Marbeni ma'aser sheni sheyesh la heter b'chol moshvos k'der Rabbi Elazar. U'motzeni bikurim shein la heter b'chol moshvos. I'll include ma'aser sheni. Why? Because there's a special heter by ma'aser sheni. If ma'aser sheni, right, becomes tameh, you're allowed to go ahead and remove it from Yerushalayim. So once it's in Yerushalayim, it becomes tameh, you can go ahead and take it out. So there's a special case of where ma'aser sheni can be eaten b'chol moshvosechem. But by bikurim, that never happens. And where do we see it? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Minay l'ma'aser sheni shenitma shepoidin asa afilu Yerushalayim. But where do you know ma'aser sheni? Then tameh, you can go ahead and redeem it even in Yerushalayim. Talmud Leimar, therefore it says kilo yisuchol seiso. It says over there because you can't go ahead and carry it, right? You have too much food, you can't carry it, put it into money. They ain't seis elachila. And what it means, lo yisuchol seiso, it means you also can't carry it. Shenars, you just saw recently in the Psukim in the Parsha. Vayisa masois meis panav, right? It says over there, right? By the brothers of Yosef, right? And they took out Vayisa and he carried over from Yaman, right? Masos meis panav, and they took out the masos from him. So we see over there that if it becomes tameh, right? Then he can go ahead and one can go ahead and redeem that. He can redeem it if he can't go ahead and eat it. Why can he not eat it if it came tameh? right? So you see, if you go ahead and if you can't eat it, you can still redeem it. Now, Uman. So that was the case over there. So we over there in that brisa. All right, let's just go back for a second. Over there in that brisa that we just brought, we said that we're including Meister Sheni because it can be redeemed or it can be eaten if it became Tameh, even outside Yerushalayim. And we're going to exclude Bikurim, right? Now, Man Shmias Le Damar Meister Sheni Nafi Klei. Who's the opinion who held that Meister Sheni, right? That one can go ahead and be, you'd say that would be Rabbi Akiva, right? And he's using the pasuk of B'chol Moshe Seichem over there to exclude it. So since over there, who was the one who said it was Rabbi Akiva? So therefore, Rabbi Akiva must be using B'chol Moshe Seichem as a source. Shema Mina Hadarbe. Therefore, we see indeed Rabbi Akiva did chayzer from his original source of Bikurim to say that his source is B'chol Moshe Seichem, and that was his opinion B'chol Moshe Seichem because he holds that Ma'aser Sheni is mutter, right? Rabbi Yosef clearly didn't. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva holds Ma'aser Sheni is mutter to use for your matzah. He holds Bikurim is usher to use for your matzah, and he learns it out from B'chol Moshe Seichem.
Yeah, but our Mishnah, right? We said that you can use Meiser Sheni that was nifta, right? And if it wasn't, it did. If you didn't do the pidyon, you couldn't use it, right? So Meiser Sheni that didn't do a pidyon, it still has the same status as Bikurim, right? I mean, the whole debate can't be about Meiser Sheni that didn't have that wasn't nifta, right?
Right. So it had correct. So it had to be. Let's say even Yerushalayim, right? Let's say in Yerushalayim, right? You want to go ahead and use your Bikurim in Yerushalayim, right? So you wouldn't be able to do that, even though it's mutter to eat, right? Even to the Kohen, right? It's mutter to eat. Nevertheless, he can't use it over there. But Meiser Sheni, right, in Yerushalayim, you would be able to go ahead and use, right? But there's a special halacha by Bikurim that we exclude Bikurim. But that exclusion of Bikurim doesn't also apply to Meiser Sheni because Meiser Sheni.
I'm saying even in Yerushalayim, you have to be po to the Meiser Sheni before you make matzah out of it, correct?
Well, if you just take your grains to Yerushalayim, right? Well, if you take your grains to Yerushalayim, then
according to Rabbi Yosef,
we learned before that you could not use Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim because Meiser Sheni has to be eaten b'simcha, and we called matzah lechem oni.
So that
Rabbi Yosef.
So it excluded Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim, but I think Ozzy is talking about Meiser Sheni that was poda, and you took something else to Yerushalayim, the money,
right?
And you bought something else, but now you have this redeemed Meiser Sheni that in your place, and you want to use that you could use because it's been poda.
So the whole point over here is it still applies back to what we said in the Mishnah in terms of when you could use Meiser Sheni, when it was redeemed, and when it wasn't redeemed, right? That is true. We thought, and just now we had a separate halacha when it comes to Bikurim that you can't use Bikurim at all. So maybe we want to sort of go ahead and erase everything we said about Meiser Sheni, that you can't use it at all, from the same exclusion that we have by Bikurim. But then we said, no, that works out differently because it does not have the same exclusion, because since Meiser Sheni at times can be eaten, even the regular Meiser Sheni, not just the redeemed Meiser Sheni, but the regular Meiser Sheni, if it comes tamei in Yerushalayim, it can now be taken out of Yerushalayim and eaten somewhere else. So therefore, B'chol Moshe Seichem does not include Meiser Sheni. If it doesn't exclude Meiser Sheni, therefore everything else which we've learned till now about Meiser Sheni still applies. But it potentially could have been that we could have thrown out all the limudim we had by Meiser Sheni because it's excluded from B'chol Moshe Seichem. Fine. Now.
So now we're saying that because it says B'chol Moshe Seichem, that's the limud that we're using to rule out Meiser Sheni.
No, to rule out Bikurim.
Rule out Bikurim.
Right, because Meiser Sheni, we just said like Rabbi Elazar holds that if Meiser Sheni becomes Tameh, you can go ahead and redeem it, put money in exchange of it, and take it outside Yerushalayim and eat it wherever you want. Since that only applies Sheni, therefore it's still part of B'chol Moshe Seichem, because if it becomes Tameh, you can take it out to Renana, you can take it out to Tel Aviv. Fine.
Okay, because you've redeemed it.
Yes.
Right.
But Bikurim,
but not
right.
but not Meiser Sheni that has not been redeemed.
For sure.
That you cannot use.
Right, for sure. That is excluded, but that's from a different pasuk. But that's not from B'chol Moshe.
Okay.
Right. Now,
Right.
Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Typically milechem aini, right? Mi shenachal ba'aini yatzazeh shenachal al b'simcha. So similar to what Eddie just said, right? So why do you go ahead and use the pasuk of B'chol Moshe Zeichem by Bikurim to exclude it from? All right. Why don't you say lechem oni, right? And in other words, over there, something has to be eaten like a mourner, as opposed to the Bikurim, which those be eaten b'simcha. So Savakar Shimon the Tanya Bikurim Asurim La'inin Rabbi Shimon Mater. So he holds like Rabbi Shimon that says Bikurim is Asur to an Onain, and Rabbi Shimon Mater's. So Bikurim can even be eaten by an Onain. If that's the case, maybe Bikurim should be included. Therefore, you need the pasuk of B'chol Moshe Vasecha. And my time of the Rabbanon. And what's the reason according to the Rabbanon over there who says Asurim La'inin? The Chassid pasuk says Lo Yisucha Lechol B'Sharecha. Right? He said you should not go ahead and eat it in your gates. Trumas yadecha elu bikurim. It says over there in the same pasuk of let me just find the pasuk here on the side. It says, right, where is this pasuk? Right, Yud Zayin. Right, lo sucha lechol b'sharecha, ma'aser deganecha, v'tzerecha v'tzerecha, u'b'chayros b'kercha v'tzayncha, chadanecha asher tidur v'devasecha trumas yadecha. The end of the pasuk says trumas yadecha. Beginning of the pasuk says you shouldn't eat, right, b'sharecha, ma'aser deganecha, all these things over there. And so both lists over there, Meiser Sheni and Bikurim, which is Trumas Yadecha. So each is Bikurim Meiser. Therefore, we make a hekesh between Bikurim and Meiser. Ma Meiser Asr La'inain, just like Meiser Sheni is Asr La'inain, as we mentioned earlier, it has to be eaten b'simcha. Bikurim Asr La'inain. So too Bikurim Asr La'inain. And therefore, if you darshan the word Aini as an Ainain, as a person who's a mourner, so therefore, it should therefore, so just like an oinain would be usher to eat ma'aser sheni, so it is usher to eat bikurim. So the Rabbanan hold that oinain is usher to eat bikurim. I have Rabbi Shimon. So what does Rabbi Shimon do that? How does Rabbi Shimon mater bikurim to an oinain? So he says truma karina and rachmana. So he says no. It calls it truma. It says trumas yadecha. It calls bikurim trumas yadecha. It says therefore kitruma. Don't look at the hekesh from that to bikurim to ma'aser sheni. Rather, learn out from truma. Ma truma materes la'inain, just like truma is mutter to an onain, bikurim mutter la'inain. So too, bikurim is mutter to an onain. Rabbi Shimon, I need these just less lay simcha mia michta ksibu the ksiva samachta b'chol tov. Understand? You're right. Okay, einachanami. You might not want to learn the hekesh between bikurim and ma'aser sheni, but Lamaisa says if it's samachta b'chol tov, it says over there is a level of simcha. So he says, no, hahu l'zman simchu dasa. Now that's coming to teach you that when do you eat your bikurim? During the zman of simcha, right? Hu dasa. The Tanah we learn in the Mishnah, me'atzeres, right? Vi'ad hachag, right? From atzeres, from Shavuos, right? Until Sukkot, maybe the Kairei, and then you go ahead and you bring your bikurim, and then you bring the psukim on it, me'achag ve'ad Chanukah. But if it's from Sukkot until Chanukah, maybe ve'nekare. Then over there you bring it, but you do not go ahead and kare. You don't go ahead and read the psukim on it. Tanur Rabban, right? Three lines from the bottom of the skinny lines. So Tanur Rabban, it says lechem oni. Lechem oni. So what does lechem oni mean? Prat lechalut v'ashisha. This excludes chalut, right? Chalut is bread that was scalded bread, right? I guess it was heated up on the outside, right? And the shisha, since he is a large gluska gedol, as Rashi says, a large loaf. So those things do not qualify as lechem oni. You have to eat lechem oni, and you can't eat scalded, which is fancy bread, and the shisha. So maybe you only need very poor quality bread, right? That only poor people eat, right? Tamalei, it says matzahs riba. It says matzahs twice to include even good bread. So even good, very fine flour bread like that of Shlomo Melech. If that's the case, lechem oni, it's poor, it can't be like the lechem of Shlomo Melech. So therefore, that excludes the scalded and the ashisha, the very large loaves. So my mash with the high, the ashisha lishna de chashivusa. Where do we see that the lashon of ashisha means it's like a chashiv? So the pasuk says, "Vayachalek l'chol ha'am l'chol ha'amon Yisrael l'meish v'ad isha." So it says over there, It says over there, and over there, David HaMelech, he gave out to the entire nation, to the Hamonam, he gave out, right? So he said over there to get to each person, the ish chalas lechem, achas, the ashpar, he gave one ashpar, the ashisha achas. He also gave an ashisha achas. The Omar Rav Chanan bar Abba. So ashpar echad, what is ashpar? I guess it was meat. The echad mishisha b'par, it was 1/6 of a par of a bull, and a shisha, this loaf of bread, was achad mishisha of ephah, right? It was 1/6 of an ephah, which is a very large loaf of bread. And I saw in the footnotes the size of it. It was 6.5 to 8 pounds of flour, right? So that was a very large amount of bread that was given out. So a shisha is davar chashuv. Therefore, you can't have a matzah the size of a shisha for lechem oni. The Shmuel, the Amar Shmuel, a shisha garba dechama, right? A shisha was actually, it was wine, right? It was wine given out that wasn't bread. It says over there, and those who love ashisha anavim, referring to wine. So therefore, that was referring to wine. It wasn't bread, but anyways, a very large loaf is an ashisha, and that is excluded from the mitzvah matzah because it is not considered to be lechem oni. All right, we'll stop here. Everyone should have a wonderful day, and I'll see many of you at Minyan. Shkayach.